So something else I want to talk to you about. You have already alluded to it. See, I've been listening to many speeches, you know, politicians and business leaders, speeches. They say fantastic things.
Absolutely.
How they will hold this accountable, how they will do that, how they do that. What's your view?
Oh, okay. Where do we start? I think I'm a
by the way, I like speeches. Okay.
Yes, I was going to say that. I'm a big fan of speeches.
Okay.
Right? And many years ago, I actually wanted to be a speech writer.
Okay.
Because I think there's and the truth is there's a lot of power in speeches. One of the people that, and I've not agreed with everything he did, but one of the people that I listen to their speeches, and I do still listen to, is Winston Churchill.
Right? Okay.
I listened to some of his speeches that he delivered at that critical moment. Not everything, but at that critical moment, because some of it
galvanized the whole country.
Yeah, made me think about the use of words, the way he said certain things. And I thought to myself, it must be hard to go to bed every day asking people to sacrifice so much, knowing that every minute people are dying, but you have to do this, right? Yeah. You have to keep whipping them up. And I've enjoyed some of the speeches from Obama. I've enjoyed some of the speeches from Martin Luther King. So I read speeches, and I think that they are very powerful. The issue I have currently with these speeches is that a lot of politicians in Africa, let's talk about Africa. It happens across, but let's talk about Africa. They talk out of the room. Right? They talk out of the room.
What do you mean?
So they say we should be doing this.
Okay.
Right? They say these are the things that needs to be done. But my issue with that is that as a leader, there are certain things within your control, within your sphere of influence. Not everything requires a speech without action. Right? Because a lot of things are within your sphere of influence.
Okay.
When you act and say, this is what we have done, that is a speech. When everything is about, this is what we should do, even though some of it are within your sphere of influence, to me, there's something wrong with that, right? Because as a leader, I can whip up a lot of emotion and sentiment in people to say, this is what we should do. This is what, and these are the reasons, these are the enemies, these are the blockages we're doing it. But why don't you do the ones within your control? And say, I've done this as an example, but we could have done more if not for these blockages. So I give you an example, right?
Okay.
I've listened to leaders in Africa in recent memory talk about the financial institutions in the West, how they are causing blockages to progress, right? And sometimes one of the key things that have been discussed recently is, why do we need to transact in the US dollars?
Okay.
When we're doing transactions locally?
Yeah.
And one of the things I thought to myself when I listen to some of these leaders talk is, so let's agree that, and I agree, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it, it is not always logical. There are reasons why people do use the US dollar, for example, right? For their transactions, stability and all that, right? But I also understand that should be an option, not be the default in every case, right? So I asked myself, why can't these countries, this leader who is in this room telling us about all this, initiate some form of example of how that can be done using transactions from the government or intergovernment, right? So if the president of Uganda and Tanzania, as an example, are talking about this, why don't they do some transactions between both governments in local currency?
Yeah.
Or why can't they say, going forward, we will not issue contracts in dollars again, right? All our contracts or for certain transactions will only be done in our local currency, right? Because we don't see the need why a local supplier should be paid in dollars. Let's start to have some practical action. But what do? We don't talk about these things. So they tell us about, we should do this, we should do this, we should do this, right? Which is fine. But my question is, what are the things within your sphere of influence? Why don't you do them, right? And that to me is where populism comes in.
Yeah.
Right? Populism gives you these big speeches.
Yeah.
Tells you about the things that we need to do. Tells you about the problems that they have.
Yes.
But then it stops you from asking the other question. But what are the other things that we can do?
Okay.
Instead of spending time talking about all the things
What
we cannot do.
What cannot do?
Yeah, let's talk about within that problem, what is it that your government can do? Because there must be something. You are the leader of a country. There must be something, you know. And when it's an intra-African issue where 4 or 5 presidents are talking about it, why can't 4 or 5 of you come together and say, okay, we're going to set an example for the rest of Africa through these 5 countries in doing those transactions in local currency, right? Instead of putting everything out there to say, I watched, there was a video, I'm trying to remember now, but I remember, I think it was Thabo Mbeki that was talking. He was on the floor, and there were some African leaders on the platform, Obasanjo and a few people, and they were talking about this peer review that they had years ago for African leaders, right? And I thought to myself, why talk about these things as if you are not the people that need to review yourself?
Okay.
Right? Why talk about, why don't you say this is what we are doing, rather than say this is what we should do? This is what we need to do, right? And that is my problem with the speeches. There's a lot of speeches going on now. There's a lot of finger pointing, right? And the problem is when you then direct all your energy at the problem and keep pointing. I'll give you a good example, right? I think it's a good example. If you look at some of the countries where there have been coups recently, right? Everything is being pointed at France, and the West, right? For the problems. But these same countries are not really giving us an idea of the other things that are not French related that they are doing, right? Because not everything in the country is France. Not everything in the country is the West, right? But everything is about, these are the problems. These are the people causing a problem, right? And to me, that is populism. And we need to move away from those speeches and start to talk about, yes, there are problems, but these are the things that the countries and leaders are doing in practical terms to solve some of the problems within their control. And I think that's the problem I have with the speeches, because the speeches to me just whip up sentiment, whip up emotion, get you really driven about, you know, all the problems that, you know, the financial institutions are causing the West. And when you have conversation, the interesting thing is I've had conversation with other Africans about this, right? The emotion is so powerful in these speeches that they do not even want to discuss the alternative. They just want to be whipped up about this. I use the word whip up a lot. They are so emotional about this. And when you say, but what exactly are you saying? What exactly is this leader saying? You are treated as if you are an agent of the West, because you should not be questioning these things.
Good. See, that's what scares me for us. Okay. We get so emotional that nobody can actually ask any relevant question, because when you ask questions and the question doesn't point fingers to the West, you're asking, what can we do? We. It's as if this guy is an agent. See, I will say this. No matter what the West has done to Africa and what it will continue doing, okay, because it will continue doing, and China will continue doing, okay, no matter what any external party does in Africa, to me, maybe I'm wrong, it's not enough to keep us where we are today. In my mind, in my view, we are where we are today because of the things we did or the things we didn't do. Because in truth, no country in the world today has developed without somebody trying to stop them? Nobody. So if anybody has done it, we can do it.
What I'll say to that, Ekene, is this, right? I have absolutely no issues with people getting emotional, because I think emotions are good. They are part of life. They are valid. But when it stops us having a rational, intellectual conversation, it defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
Become a rabble that simply just go with one thought process. And it has really worked in the past. Right?
It has never really worked. Yeah. Anyway.
When people cannot break down the speeches being told by leaders, or cannot be skeptical of the intention of a leader, just to accept on face value, then it's a society that is creating a lot of problem for itself. And I agree with you that, if we really look at where we are today, we cannot divorce ourselves from the consequences of where we are today.
Yeah.
We cannot hold our hands up and say everything has been done to us, right? But there's an interesting argument to that.
Okay.
And people have said that, yes, they agree we have a hand in it, but that hand is also the fault of the West. Because they have either corrupted our brothers and sisters to do those things. Our brothers and sisters have sold us, so it's not our fault, really.
Okay. So no agency. Okay.
I told somebody, I made this analogy, right? And people laughed about it. Let me give you the analogy, right? I'll give you this analogy, right? You and I come from Nigeria, right? You might recognize this. See?
Yes.
When a man or woman does something wrong back home, his other half will go to the pastor, right?
Yes. Yes.
And the pastor will say, it is your mother-in-law.
Yes.
Don't blame the man or the woman. It is the mother-in-law that is the problem. So it takes away the responsibility. So they start to fire prayer at the mother-in-law as a problem. And then the mother-in-law dies. And you think that there's peace. And they say, no. She's still after you from the grave. So it is not your fault. It is the fault of the mother-in-law. And when you would have prayed and prayed and prayed and nothing is happening, then the pastor will come and say, look, it is the devil. We have to fight the devil. Because the devil is the one that is causing this problem. So at no point do you become responsible for your action. It is always somebody else's fault. Why you're where you are, right? And we have built this culture up of no responsibility, right? I was telling somebody many years ago that Nigeria is one of the few countries I know where people will go to vote on Saturday. The result gets announced on Saturday night, for example. And on Sunday, they're in church, praying that God should touch the heart of the politician to do the right thing. Right? That God, please touch this man. They are not asking the man to be accountable, but they want God to go and touch so that the devil will not use him against us.
Okay.
Right? And that is what we'll do for the next 4 years. And then we'll go back again and do the same thing, right? So we don't accept responsibility. It comes back to what I said. In my view, we are a traumatized continent.
Okay.
And all these things are reflective of the trauma we have gone through. The trauma has been caused by our colonial masters. We cannot divorce them. They have been caused by our own leaders who have done a lot of things to us, but they have also been caused by our followers.
Okay.
By simply not doing the right thing. So we're traumatized. And that is why some of the things we do does not make sense. Logically, they don't make sense because we're traumatized. And we need to come to a place of healing, in my view, for us to move forward.
Okay, Shola, on that note, we end this discussion. See, next discussion, me and you, and maybe we'll bring somebody to discuss this trauma issue. Because I will tell you, yes, I agree to an extent, but me, I'm always on the side of personal responsibility. in everything. All right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Shola, thank you very much to being here today.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure always. All right.
Oshigo.
All right. Okay, now take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye.
Yeah.